Well, we had such a good discussion on entrepreneurship that we decided to do a part 2. And the one thing that really tickled my mind was allowing your children a safe space to fail. Because I know I'm really risk averse, and I think I may pass it on to my children. But if I give them the freedom to fail when they're young, it will help them when they're older. So Shirley, will you please continue the discussion?
Yes, I once watched the testimony of somebody who shared all the little jobs that he did as a youngster growing up. And it was things like delivering newspapers, and then it was making things that he sold door to door. And this man shared how every little business venture that he started taught him something about either marketing something well, or packaging it well, or delegating some part of the process to somebody else. But everything was a learning experience, and one experience always builds on the next one. And I think this applies not only in childhood when you're trying out different entrepreneurial ventures, but even in adult life. Everything we do, we learn new skills that we carry forward with us to whatever comes in the future. So I think, like you say, allowing children that safe space to test and try out things is very important. And that is the spirit of an entrepreneur. You know, they say Thomas Edison tried out how many different versions of the light bulb before he found the right innovation that worked. And we need to tell children that learning what doesn't work is as important as learning what does work. And as long as we learn a lesson from it, it was a valuable experience. It wasn't a waste, and it wasn't a failure. The other thing we've done that I think is important just to expand on a little bit is having our children at home with us as homeschoolers. They're able to watch and learn so much more about business that adults do than our generation were able to, because we were stuck in a classroom. So for example, some of our children at different times have been with us when we've done things like buying and selling motor vehicles, buying and selling properties. We've had one son who particularly enjoyed coming with my husband and I to go and see a lawyer who was going to quote us for a particular, no, sorry, not a lawyer, an architect, that was right. And I realized just coming along and seeing how the introductions are done, and people shake hands and say, how do you do, sit down, how can I help you, listening to the scenario, they're learning business etiquette. And we've also included them with things like doing our own taxes, because my husband and I are both self-employed. We do the filing and the paperwork, and it's sort of basic things like categorizing your expenses and things. But they've learned so much more than we did. I mean, my 19-year-old son knows more about tax than I probably knew even 5 years ago, because he's learned about it at the same time as we've been learning different aspects of that. So a lot of things are caught rather than taught.
Yes. It also seems that perseverance is quite important, because you have to carry on and try again, and not go and sit in a heap. And Frank, you spoke in the previous session about unlearning skills, but that doesn't mean you forget your skills.
Definitely not. You have to fine-tune them much more, but sometimes when you talk about unlearning, we are taught ways of doing things which are not appropriate. The classic example is if you go to school, you're taught to use a dictionary to find the meaning of a word, or you're taught to use an encyclopedia to do your school task on whatever the project may be. The school will prohibit you from using Wikipedia or using Google. So they are, in many respects, stuck in a very old model of handling information, and that's a skill you have to unlearn. You have to unlearn to run to books first. You have to learn how to use Google for all it's worth, how to use Wikipedia, understanding the shortcomings of these tools, but at the same time, one quick browse through Wikipedia will give you far more information than the Encyclopedia Britannica would have given you, because Wikipedia is up to date, and the Encyclopedia Britannica was never up to date. So you have to learn how to handle information differently and to how to access it differently. That's one example which is in stark contrast to the standard school system, for example. But there are other things specific to professions which just simply will change. The way that architects will design buildings is going to change. You will no longer need to use plans, you will now use three-dimensional tools. So the skill of drawing it on paper already went out the window when computer-assisted drawing came around, and now that in itself will be changed yet again. So when I say unlearning, it's in a sense archiving or filing a deep way. It may still be of value, but it's not the be-all and end-all. The nub of the problem, the core of the problem, is solved differently, but it's still the same problem. The architect still has to design a house that people enjoy living in, and the only way to do that is to ask the right questions. So the core of an architect's business is not drawing, but the core is to understand the needs of the people he or she is designing for. And that is what I'm trying to teach my children, is it's not about what you do, it's how well you understand what you need to do. And that requires a skill set of asking questions. And as an employer, I often despair of the young generation coming out of school, because they were taught not to ask questions. They were taught to just simply follow the rules. And in my business, I need people to ask questions, and they cannot ask the questions. And that's not something I can teach them. That they should have learned long ago when they were still children. So that's what I never want my children to lose, that skill of asking the right questions and pursuing the answers. As long as you do that, you will never be out of a job.
The more I listen to you, the more I see how home education just fits with this philosophy of entrepreneurship, because home educators tend to do things in a new way. You adjust constantly, you measure the needs and your solution. So, yeah, what do you think?
I could just give an example of something that Frank's comments reminded me of, the mindset of people. At a point, one of my daughters she was starting her first business, and she was going to be selling a product, so she needed a bank account. So I said to her, okay, let's go from bank to bank and find out what options they offer to children, to teenagers. You know, are there lower interest rates or better interest rates or lower bank costs and what have you. And it was such an interesting experience as an adult, because each bank we went to assumed that we were just there to open this bank account with them. They didn't understand that we were shopping around and we had questions that they had to answer. They assumed that they had the answers and they were giving us the solution. And we had to actually say, no, hang on, we're not here to open the bank account. We want you to tell us, you know, and then we gave our set of questions. But it was that mindset of, we know the answers, not asking the questions to the client and saying, you know, does our product suit your needs? So that was quite interesting. And we shopped around, and in the end, you know, she chose a particular bank for specific reasons. But just that shopping around experience was quite interesting, seeing the mindset of the people who were at these service counters in the various banks.
So they weren't offering the service.
Well, they were just assuming that we had come just for their option. You know, they didn't realize that we were going through a process of going from bank to bank, and we were making comparisons, and we wanted them to give us information, not just give us the paperwork to sign on the bottom line, we're opening it. We hadn't reached that point yet, but they didn't get that. So they obviously are used to people just coming in and saying, I want to open a bank account for my child, and then they just fill in the forms and they go for it. Whereas we were a little bit more discerning, I think, because we wanted to see which deal was going to be the best. and that's an important life skill as well, to learn to comparison shop. You know, which car are you going to buy, which model, what are its features, what computer are you going to buy, what cell phone are you going to buy. We all have different needs and different criteria that we're looking for, and a salesperson needs to appreciate that.
Frank, I know you have a long list of topics that you want to talk on, so shoot.
I'll keep it short. I think I'll just talk about the mistakes that we made and the lessons we learned. We started early with the children that could start early. I've got the one daughter who at the age of 3 was able to present herself very well. I've got another daughter at the age of 6, still is not up to that level, but we have to teach her other skills to supplement the skill of presenting herself. So we're still on a road with her. So it varies from child to child. So we had to learn to not just implement something according to age, but according to the development of the child and the ability of the child to handle it. The other mistake that we made was having long-term projects. I don't think you should ever have a long-term project with a child. Like, I'll give you an example. We started a chicken business where my one son was cultivating or growing chickens out of eggs, and then they were laying eggs which he was selling, and the idea is also that we would sell the chickens. Now this is all months and months and even years in the making, and children lose interest, and what's even worse is they start bonding with these chickens as pets. So when it comes to selling chickens, it's always it's an emotional subject. It's not something that comes easily. So don't do anything with animals where your animal has to be slaughtered or sold, because you're going to have problems with children who bond with the pets. And something like selling eggs, again, it's a problem because you don't earn a lot, and it's very hard to keep book if you're not up to it about whether your business is actually in profit or not, because you have to constantly juggle quite a few inputs and outputs to see whether it's a viable business. So that's something that borders on actually just keeping pets instead of being a business. Other long-term projects we had was selling vegetables or so. Again, unfortunately it takes a while for veggies to grow, and by the time the children have to harvest and process it, they've kind of lost interest in the business because they're not earning money all the time. And I realize there's a reason why American kids start their businesses selling lemonade, because that is actually the kind of business that is perfect for children to sink their teeth into. It's something you make in the morning and you sell in the afternoon, and you've got the money in your piggy bank in the evening. That kind of instant gratification is very important when talking business with kids. So I do encourage them in that direction. Let's say, let's make chocolates. Just buy the chocolate slabs, melt them, pour them into other shapes, maybe add a few bits and pieces to make it different, and then sell it immediately. So you've got the whole process down pat quickly. It's not about whether you've got the best chocolate on the street. It's simply because you want to get the experience of making, selling, banking, making, selling, banking over and over and over again. It doesn't have to be profitable. It just has to be something that the cycle turns itself all the time. If that cycle wheel turns too slowly, as I've unfortunately had the experience, that you don't get much of a lesson out of it. Other things which are very handy in that context are things like I mentioned chocolate. With dairy, you can actually make butter in a few minutes, and if you want to work with cream, make butter and sell the butter, fantastic. You can if you can find a market for that. Other cookies can work, but then again, make sure that you have the cookies baked and sold in a very short period of time, so it doesn't become just another wait and see product, or the other children eat the cookies long before you can sell them. So that's just some ideas for instant gratification of business, which is important to teach the lesson of making and selling.
Now, door-to-door selling, online selling, flea markets, where do you sell? Is it still safe to send your kids around the neighborhood to go knocking on doors? Is it feasible to have a stall at a flea market? Help me with that question.
Shirley?
Well, we haven't done much door-to-door selling, and I think nowadays in South Africa, depending on where people live, most families are probably a little bit nervous about that, unless they're living in a nice security complex or something. My one child did actually buy nuts in bulk and repackage them into small 100-gram packets, and did go around the neighborhood for a short while selling that. It was quite a nice, fun adventure, but at that point we were in a safe neighborhood and she was old enough to do that. But it's not something I would encourage everybody to do. We've never done flea markets. We've done 1 or 2 homeschool entrepreneur days. The one was not a good experience, a learning curve, where we bought sweets and chocolates and cool drinks to sell on the day. but there were other stalls selling homemade foods, and those were the big sellers. So, you know, it was a lesson to learn, all right, at different functions, different types of products will do better. I'm quite keen on the online selling because you can work from home. And I think as adults, you know, if we want to be family oriented, it's quite nice to have a home-based business. And I think also the internet is the future. It's where people are going to do a lot of shopping, and not just shopping. You know, the internet can be used for business connecting, for marketing, for sourcing information. So our children need to learn that it's not just there for browsing YouTube. You know, that's what most kids enjoy about the internet, or connecting on Instagram and social media. They've got to learn all the other functions of using the internet. So I myself have a couple of income generating websites. Like Frank said, I've had to unlearn some skills and keep on learning new skills. And it's a challenge because you just think you've mastered something, and then Google changes the rules and things have to be done differently, and you have to upgrade and fix and format. And it's an ongoing challenge, but I think that is the nature of this era that we're living in. And I can see that for our children, at least some of mine, they embrace that. They're quick to learn it. You know, sometimes I say to my older teens, like, how do you know this stuff? I didn't teach it to you. Like, Mom, I've been using XYZ online for how long? You know, I've taught myself. And that's the thing. They've got to learn to teach themselves, because we can't teach them everything. And even what they know now is going to be upgraded, and, you know, it's going to change in the years to come. So they have to be able to teach themselves.
Great. Thank you very much. It's been another really informative and enjoyable session, and I thank you for your time.